So when the guys at Skylum messaged me to say would I be interested in looking at their Luminar Neo software, my first reaction was, but that's because over the last few years Luminar Neo has conjured up ideas for me of skies being dropped in, false skies, oversaturated images that don't look realistic, and I'm all about the natural. I think the natural world's brilliant. So I had a look at their website and actually I was intrigued because there are some features on there which I definitely think are going to be worth exploring for me as a hyperrealism landscape photographer. The question is it going to be good software for you? Let's go and find out. Close to things, and I really like the effect. What a catch that was. It's very windy today. Hi, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Dave Peck and I'm a landscape photographer who produces landscape photography videos every Sunday 6 p.m. here on YouTube. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, then subscribe to the channel, go and check out my back catalogue. I'll leave some links at the end of the video. So in this week's video I'm going to be looking at the photo editing software called Luminar Neo, which you may have heard of. If you've been in the photography business at all, then I'm sure you would have done. And as I've said earlier, Luminar Neo conjured up to me false skies, everything's over the top, oversaturated, but don't dismiss it offhand like I did originally, because there's actually some really intelligent, excellent stuff that you can use in your landscape photography. Let's have a look in the software. I can't show you all the features, I mean there are loads of them. So what I'm going to do is just going to pick out the ones that I like the best and just talk you through them. So let's start then with the main opening screen of Luminar, which is the catalogue. I'm going to assume that you've imported images into it, and now we're going to have a look at what extensions we have access to in the catalogue area. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at from the catalogue, which is the main area, I'm going to look at this extension called focus stacking. So if we look at these images, I've got 3 images here, all shot on a tripod with exactly the same exposure from the top of a fell in the Lake District, looking at across to Little Langdale. And if we look at these images closely, you will see that once it's rendered, you'll see that this particular image, the holly tree, is very sharp, but that's where I focused. And on this one, you'll notice that the holly tree is not sharp because this is focused in the mid distance. Okay, so to make that really sharp all the way through, I need to blend these 3 exposures together. And all I do for that is I hold down the Command on a Mac, Control on a Windows computer, and just drag them into this focus stacking extension. Now, interestingly enough, I have graded these pictures. So I've color graded one, saved it as a preset, and applied that preset to the other 2. But once this is focus stacked, you'll notice something very strange, which is the focus stacked image, which is here, watch, has now gone back to the default. Now this is what it looked like originally. So I would now need to color grade this again using one of my presets, which I've obviously, there we go. So I called it Little Langdale. So what I'm now going to need to do is to go back and grade this again. Now in Lightroom I would grade one, apply that grade to all of those images, and it would stay like that. So there we go, that's now graded it back as to how it was. Whereas with Luminar you do that, you don't bother grading it, you just put them you put them together, focus stack them together, and then you grade it. So that's one interesting thing. But if we look at the final image and we zoom back in, we can now see that we've got a very sharp holly tree, and this is rendering very sharp midground and a very sharp background. Looking there over to the Langdale Mountains, look, it does a great job at that, and that is so easy to use. It's amazing. It's really good. Just drag all three of those in to the focus stacking extension and it does the job for you. So that's pretty good, and I like that a lot more than I like the solution in Lightroom, because Lightroom haven't got one. You have to put it into Photoshop and blend it that way, but this is a lot better. So that's focus stacking. So the second feature I want to show you is something called Magic Light. Now this is an image from 2015. It was taken at Portland Bill, and if we look at the image you'll see that it's a lovely image. This was how sunset was. The rocks may be a little bit dark, but actually what I wanted to show you was this bit here, because I waited a long time for this lighthouse to shine its light. I dodged it in and tried to make it give me a starburst, but as you can see, unsuccessfully until now. Because if we go to the edit menu, you'll see, and this is where you'll spend most of your time if you're using Neo, and I love lots of these things. We'll talk about the crop maybe, enhance maybe, but what I want to look at now is something called Magic Light. Now this is a piece of AI, and what it will do is it will pick out pinpoints of light like we have here, and it will turn it into a starburst. So look at what happens if we turn the intensity up. You'll see that we can see that starburst starting to appear, and I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Let's just make this bigger so you can see it. So okay, and we've got different sliders here to play with. I can make this quite big if I want to. Just wait for that to render. There we go. And that, as you can see, look, I don't really want very wide beams on this. It needs to be a bit slower, a bit narrower, but we can get it to have a little bit of a glow coming up. And there's so many things that you can adjust. The number of beams if you want to. I quite like kind of 8. That looks quite good, and I can rotate them round a little bit if I want to make it work even better. And that is very clever, isn't it? Isn't that wonderful? So that's how I always imagined it. Let's just make it bigger and make it sharp a little bit more, and I think that is really nice. While we're here, let me just show you some other quick features. So crop, you can drag, you can change your size here. So if you like doing squares, or I've got a 64-24 here, which as you know, if you watch the channel, you know I like that crop in woodland especially. I'm going to leave it as the original. I can also free it if I want to, and I could just crop it in. Now I'm quite happy with that crop actually, but what you can do with it, which is really interesting, if you struggle with your composition or you just want some ideas maybe, then click on this button here which says composition, and it will actually, look, can you see what it's done? It's actually reduced that in, it's got rid of all this area on the right hand side, and it will give you an idea of how to compose. Now I found that to be okay, but I'm actually happy enough really to just do my own thing with that, so I'm not going to use that so much. Let me just pull it in there because I think it kind of needs that little bit, and I'd like to have the lighthouse on the thirds. So there we go. I'm going to apply that crop there, which is now doing. And the other thing is down the bottom. Now actually, sorry, before we go there, let's have a look at enhance. And that's pretty good at making everything a little bit sharp. I think it's almost like the clarity setting in Lightroom. Sky enhancer will just give it a bit of punch, which often works very well. It's kind of why I used to use an ND grad. And then if we go down to the bottom here, then there's things here like atmosphere, sun rays we can talk about. Relight will lighten up the front or the back, or darken down the front or the back. If you do portraits, there's loads of stuff there for you. I'm interested really though in the dodge and burn, so it will lighten, darken, erase, really good. So I'm just going to lighten square bracket will just make it bigger. See the feather there on the outside? I'm just going to paint through here and just lighten up this little bit of rock, and that's all it needs, look, just to give it a little bit of kick. Brilliant, there we go. So that's the Magic Light extension, plus some other little bits and pieces we've had a look at. So the next feature I want to show you saves me a bundle of time. As a Nikon Z7 user, and Nikons have got a very wide lens mount, which means that they attract dust. So let's have a look at this feature. So here we are on the catalogue, and this feature, if you look at this image here, you can see at the top, look, there's a hair showing, and here, oops, see that again. You can see that there's a hair. You can see there's a hair showing, and actually there's also here, look, a little bit of camera dust, not much, but enough. Now what I can do with this then is, if I edit this, there is a, let's go back to the tools. So if we look here at the erase button, now I can select, if I want to, an object, which I can do in Lightroom and Photoshop, but look, I don't need to even worry about that, because here we've got something called remove dust spots. So if I click on this, if we look at the top here, you'll see that it's removing it. It's using the AI to assess the image, and there we are, it's gone. Isn't that amazing? Look, completely gone. Let's just do that again. Right, back out again. Yeah, okay, so let's go out, go. So if we look at this image, and this is something that's going to save me so much time, and already has. I use a Nikon Z7 II, and it's got a very wide lens mount, which means that it attracts dust. And if we look at this image here, this was shot at a place called Walton on the Naze, and you can see there's a hair sitting just inside the lens mount, and actually somewhere here, look, there's also very faintly a little piece of dust. Now I use f16 quite a lot. I stop down quite a lot in my landscapes, which means that any dust that's on the sensor or anywhere near the lens is going to show up. So this is a really useful feature, because what I can do here, if I click on the erase tool, now I can, if I want to, just select, as you can see here, I could draw around it like I do in Photoshop and like I do in Lightroom, but I don't need to even worry about this, because here, look at this, remove dust spots. So look what happens when I click it. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see. So here's the line and the dust spot, and it's gone. Look at that, it's already gone, completely disappeared, and the dust spot has also gone, and that is going to save me an absolute mountain of time. I've used it a lot, and I can just report back that it's brilliant. It's so clever. It saves me so much time. So now what I do in Lightroom is I do my corrections, export it into Luminar Neo, hit the erase dust spots remove button. I know it's clean before I carry on. Very nice. So here's the last piece of software I'd like to show you from Luminar Neo. So if we look in the computer, this is a handheld abstract kind of shot that I've shot recently, and I don't normally handhold stuff, but I'm using the stabilization, but even so it's not quite, I would say, 100% sharp. But if we look in the tools, we can see that one of these is super sharp, and it's not a sharpening tool. What it will do though is will sharpen the things that are slightly blurry or out of focus. So I'm just going to hit low. I love this animation. I might put a sound on it actually, because it seems like it deserves something. And this is going to analyze it, and then we'll have a look at the results. And here we go. So if I look before and after, look look how much sharper that is than it was. That has just sharpened it up enough to make that worthwhile. I think this image was, I can't remember what this was shot at actually. Let's go back and have a look in the catalogue. So it was shot at 1/6 of a second at 102mm, so quite a lot. But as you can see, that is a load better than it was. Let's go back to the edits, back to this, and we can have a look at how it was before and how it was after. That's amazing. I think that's brilliant. So there we go. What did you think? There are so many, as I've said before, there are so many other things that you can use a Luminar Neo for, and I really have come away from this kind of horrible, garish, extra sky kind of idea, which I thought wouldn't work for me. But the tools that it has got are amazing. Just because the tool is there, it doesn't mean you have to use it. So my workflow now tends to be import with Lightroom. I use the masks in Lightroom because I feel they're better. Mask bits off, adjust the exposure, and then I send it into Neo. And Neo adds a little bit of source for me, a little bit of polish. Just gives me some tweaks that I can do just to make the image stand out and make it lovely, but at the same time keeping it natural. And then it goes back into Lightroom, where I will either put a frame around it in Photoshop or I'll export it onto my external hard drives. So I hope you found that useful. If you have, give us a thumbs up. Till next Sunday at 6 PM. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.